What is up, everyone? Jeremy here. Welcome to In the Mix. In this video, I'm going to show you how I use nothing but stock Logic Pro plugins to create this modern metal mix. All right, here we are in the DAW, and we're just going to get right into this. So the very first thing we're going to look at is the drums. And for the drums, as I mentioned, it is all 100% stock. So this is the Logic Pro Drum Kit Designer. I will pull it up on the screen so you can see what it looks like. And there it is. So this is the stock Logic Pro Drum Designer. And I'll show you kind of run through what I selected here for the kit. And the very first thing is the snare. There is quite a selection of different snares, toms, cymbals, kicks, and all of that. You may not see them immediately. When I first pulled up this, pulled up the drum kit designer in Logic, I only had one drum kit in there. I think it was called the SoCal kit, and I actually had to go look up information on how I download additional kits. I found it and I downloaded a ton of them. Anyways, there's a lot of additional instruments out there. If you're only seeing one kit, just look up the information on how you download them, and you'll get all of these different instruments. So the one that I landed on is down here. It's called the Studio Maple, and this is what it sounds like after all the mix and everything. And I will be doing an A/B comparison, so sit tight for that to show you what this sounded like before all of the processing. But this is what it sounds like now. It's a pretty good sound of snare. So this is these are the toms. Oop. There it is. Okay, and then the kick. Nice low end and nice crispy snap on the top there. Yep, so that's the Maple Punch kick, and then I should show you the toms or the modern Maple. For the cymbals, I went with just the straight modern cymbals. So we've got, and then the modern dark for the ride. And then the hi-hat is the modern dark. So now here we'll just kind of run through, and I'll A/B each different part of the kit so you can hear what it sounded like before and after the processing. And I'm not gonna run through every single plugin that I put in every single track throughout this entire template. And instead, what I'm gonna do is just put the link to a download of this entire Logic Pro template in the description of this video. So if you want it, it's in the description of the video. Find the link, download it, and you can take a look at every single plugin I used across every single track in the entire template and use it to your liking. But just to kind of show you some before and afters, we're gonna do some A/B comparisons. So here we'll start with the overheads, just because this is the very first one here. So I'm gonna solo this and then just play back just a little bit. Now let me get to some cymbals. Here we go. All right, so you can hear it's mostly top end, and so that's obviously because of some EQ, but I'm gonna remove all the processing on this, and this is what it sounded like before. So there you go, that's the rooms, or the overheads. And because I didn't need or want all of that kind of lower end, I just kind of wanted to focus on the cymbals for the overheads, so that's why I got rid of most of that lower end in my overheads, because that's all going to come from the rooms. But now let's go ahead and take a look, or listen rather, to the kick. And this is the way that Logic does this, is they have a kick in and a kick out. So my guess is the kick in is there's going to be a mic right where the beaters hit the drum head on the kick, and then the out is on the back side, the back head where it's got the hole cut out, and they probably had a mic right there. And the way those are typically sound is the mic that's on the head where the beaters are hitting the drum head. You get more snap, and there's less bass to it. And then on the back side, it's the opposite. There's less snap and more bass. So you kind of blend these to taste. But here's what I landed on. I'm going to solo the kick before. Here's what it sounds like with the processing. Okay, and then here's what it sounds like without any processing whatsoever. Yeah, it took quite a bit to get that to get the sound that I was looking for, or at least close to it. And again, so here's what it sounds like with the processing. So yeah, again, you download this template and take a look at it all that I did to kind of tailor this kick tone to what I was looking for. But there's quite a bit of EQ, some enveloper and whatnot in there, but obviously some compression too. So moving on to the snare. So we've got snare top and snare bottom, and you'll see the snare bottom in this is really pulled back. I don't like much snare bottom in my mix. I want more of the crispy snap from the top snare mic, but there is a little bit in there. All right, and so here is a quick A/B of the snare. So this is what it sounds like with the processing. Okay, and then this is what it sounds like without any processing. Quite the difference. You'll notice how much more beefy and punchy it is with the processing. And so again, I'll go ahead and turn this on and just play it back here real quick. And this is what it sounds like with the processing. Yeah, a lot more beef, a lot more snap and punch to it there. So that's the snare. And the other one I really want to point out is the rooms. So there's two different rooms in this. And so again, if I pull up the drum kit designer, if you click on any of the instruments, you'll see down here on the bottom, you can turn on or off sending this instrument to the room, which is nice. But you can also change between room A and room B, which is nice as well, because I wanted to process different pieces of the kit differently in the room. Now, I totally understand that this in real life isn't always the case. Like you can't just pull out instruments from a room mic and move them to a different one. You know, if you're actually miking like a real drummer in a drum room. However, we can with this, so I'm taking advantage of it. So you'll see I'm sending the kick to room B, the snare to room A, the toms to A. It looks like the cymbals, I believe, are going to room B. So you can see how I've kind of got things split up because I wanted to process them differently. All right, so here's a quick comparison of room A. So here is what it sounds like with the processing, and you will hear mostly just the snare drum because that's really the only thing I have going to room A besides the toms, and the toms only play once at the very end of this little snippet. So all you're gonna really hear is snare, but this is what it sounds like. Okay, and then without the processing, it sounds like this. Quite the difference. So here it is again with the processing. There it is. And room B sounds like this. And then without the processing, it sounds like this. Notice though the only real difference there, at least that you really hear, is all the low end that I'm cutting out because I don't need it. I don't want it in this room mic. I just kind of wanted the topper end specifically here. So that's why you're hearing mostly just the top end. But that is the quick comparison of the room mics. The last thing I'll show here is this bus send that I'm using to add punch. This is a parallel processing, right? So we're sending signal into this bus and then blending it back in with the original. But here's a quick solo of what this punch bus sounds like. Yeah, super, super punchy. But obviously it could be overkill if it blended in too much with the original. So right now I've got it blended in at about negative 14.6. And so let me turn off the processing and you can kind of really hear the difference here of what this is doing. So this is without the processing. Notice that huge difference. And then again with the processing. Yep, there it is. All right, and so just a quick soloing of the drums themselves, and this is what they sound like all together. There you go. You can really hear that that room mic coming out with, specifically on the snare there, kind of adds some depth and some space to the sound. So you know, I think it turned out pretty good. So now the bass. So what I'm using for bass is obviously the bass amp designer and pedal board. Again, I'm not going to go through every single plugin, but I will pull up the bass amp and pedal board and show you these. I have shown these in other videos as well. This is kind of my standard these days for bass tone, but I'm using the grip pedal, and let me actually pull it over here. So I am using the grit pedal, as you can see here. You can see the settings there, and then this is the bass amp and cabinet I'm using. I'm using the classic 8x10 cabinet, the modern amp, and the full dynamic 421 microphone. You can see all the settings on the screen there, but the way that I do my bass, and I've mentioned this in many other videos, so if you're new to my channel, this is new to you, but if you're not new to my channel, you've heard this many times before, I'm sure. But when I process bass, I do it, there's two tracks. I track once and then duplicate it, so I have two separate tracks, which is why you're seeing two tracks on here for bass that are identical. The top one is my DI bass. And what that is, it's literally just the DI signal of the bass, but I'm low passing at around 200 hertz so that so everything above 200 hertz is completely cut off. There's no sound coming through. And so here is what that sounds like. So you can hear that's just all the super low and, you know, the low end and the sub bass. And then I pair that with the opposite EQ curve with a high pass at around 200 hertz that is running through an amp with some distortion and other processing, and this is what that sounds like. So there you go. And then when you put them together with all the other processing I have going on the bass, this is what it sounds like. Really dirty and gritty. I love this high gain bass tone, but that's what the bass sounds like. Again, 100% stock Logic plugins. And then let's go ahead and solo the bass and the drums together, and we'll start building the mix back in. Here we go. So this is bass and drums. Okay, so there was the bass and drums. Now let's move on to the guitar tone, which, aside from some of the drum tracks, specifically like the kick and the snare, this took a while to kind of find something that I felt like was worthy enough to at least mention in this video. But continuing on with our mix here. So what I used, again, 100% stock Logic. So this is the Logic pedal board and Logic guitar amp designer. Again, I'm not going to run through everything. I'm sharing the template. You can download them and check it all out. But just kind of quickly, you can see I'm using the double dragon with kind of the standard like tube screamer settings, like drive all the way off, tone about at noon, and then the level all the way up. And then I'm using the EQ here just to kind of cut some of the lows and some of the higher end, and then to push the signal a little bit more. And then we're using the brown head with the modern British 4x12 cabinet and a dynamic 57 microphone, and you can see the placement right there. And this is what the guitars sounded like. So I'm just going to solo both of these and just kind of listen to this a little bit. So that's a pretty decent guitar tone for a free stock Logic Pro plugin setup. Like I was honestly not expecting to even get that close to something that I was looking for, but I felt like that was pretty decent. It's not the greatest guitar tone that I've ever heard by far, but for free, especially when you put it in the whole mix, it actually sits pretty well. So that is the guitar tone, and now that's the rhythm guitar tone. Now there's also this cleanish, like crunchy part at the beginning. It's just got a little tiny bit of breakup on it, but it's mostly clean. And again, this was the Logic pedal board and amp designer, so I'll pull one up on the screen so we can look at it. And this is what it looks like. So again, it is the brown head with the modern British 4x12 and a ribbon 121 microphone this time, and that's because I wanted a little bit more low end, less top end and mids, which is the ribbon is that's what it's going to give you. It's going to give you a darker sound, so that's what I wanted there. You can see I've rolled back the gain quite a bit on the amp, boosted up the bass a little bit, and just a couple other tweaks. But then a lot of the processing is obviously coming from the pedal board, which is coming after the amp in this case. You could probably put it before the amp either way, but I wanted to use these as like post effects. So it's after the amp and after the cabinet. And so this is what I landed on. I put a fuzz in here. It's not active, but you know, if you download the template and you dig the fuzz sound, you can activate it. It's already there. But we're using the Springbox reverb. We're using the retro chorus. A little bit of a phaser, oops, undo that, and then some delay. So that's what we've got going on here. And then, or I said phaser, I think this is actually kind of like a flanger. But anyways, here's what these clean tones or ambient tones sound like. There you go. So you can hear there's a little tiny bit of breakup in there happening, and I kind of like that. All right, so that is all of the pieces of the mix. So we talked about the drums, the bass, the guitar, the ambient guitar, or the rhythm guitar and ambient guitar. The last thing I will show you is the master bus, or actually the instrument bus, and then that goes into the master bus. So we'll take a look at these real quick. So the very first thing is you have to keep in mind your gain staging, right? So typically with any of these like main mix buses like this, the very first plugin I put at the top is a gain, just a standard gain, so that I can add some headroom if I need to. So if the signal's coming in a little hot, I can just pull it back a few dB, give myself some headroom for any processing that I want to do in the bus. So that's why you're seeing the gains at the top of both the instrument bus and the main master bus. And then the very next thing in my instrument bus is an EQ, and this is just so that I can visualize the EQ curve coming in from all of the instruments. So the way that this is routed is all of the instruments go through this instrument bus. And then the next thing I'm doing here is a trick that I actually picked up from one of my favorite plugin alliance compressors, which is the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor Class A. Now, this is obviously not going to work at all like that compressor does, but basically the way that it works is there's two sections to that compressor. There's an optical section and then the VCA section. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of like mimicking that, where I have an opto part at the top and then that feeds into a VCA. And there's not a ton of processing happening here. It's very, very minor. But I kind of liked the way that it sounded, so I left it. And I'll just give you an example of what these look like as far as gain reduction. So there you go. As you can see on the optical, it's not doing much at all except for any hits that come in a little bit loud. You can see it duck just about maybe 1 dB. And then the VCA is kind of doing more of a leveling style compression, where it's not jumping back and forth a lot. It's kind of hanging out right at about -1. And I really liked the way that sounded, so I left it. And then we go into the master bus. And again, we've got gain at the top. Then we go into a console EQ to just tweak a couple things. We've got, let's see, at 112 hertz, I'm boosting up a little bit. and then at what, 5,000 kilohertz, we're boosting up just a little bit more, and then adding some top end. And this is to kind of follow Nolly. I've seen a lot of Nolly's mixing videos, and he does like a top-down mixing approach, so I started doing the same thing. And so this is to add some EQ on my master bus so that it's less processing I have to do throughout the rest of the mix to get things to sound the way that I want them. And here's a prime example of that. I will play this back and I will turn off the EQ and turn it back on this master bus, and you're going to hear the night and day difference. So here it is. So you can hear that massive difference, right? And that's on the master bus. So if I didn't have this, that means I have a lot more EQing I've got to do to all the rest of the tracks throughout the mix to get it to sound the way that you just heard it there. So that's that top-down approach. So that's the very first thing, is just adding some clarity there. All right, and the next thing up after the console EQ is this channel EQ. And this is just doing some very, very small moves, boosting up just slightly at 800 hertz, 10,000, 10 kilohertz, and then at 60 hertz, a low shelf with a low pass at around 17,600 hertz or 17.6 kilohertz. Just some small moves there just to clean things up. And then we go into another channel EQ, and this has a little bit of a bigger move, but it's still a subtle thing in the overall mix. And that's because if you notice, we're processing the sides only. So we're not doing stereo like the other EQs. This is just on the sides of our mix. It's not affecting anything in the middle. And the reason for that is this is going to help expand the width of our sound, of our overall mix, by adding additional clarity on the sides. So I will play this back and turn this on and off. Really focus on the things on the sides of the mix, like the cymbals, for example. Hone in on those, and you'll really kind of hear this expand when I turn it on, and it adds clarity. So there you go. Hopefully you can hear that, because I can hear it. It adds a night and day difference with the expansion of the mix there, and then that clarity. So that's a subtle effect, but definitely one worth having here. All right, and then the last things in our master bus here are the stock Logic limiter, just to kind of give us some additional volume. So we've got this direction mixer, and the reason I added this here is so that I could listen to the mix back in mono. Highly recommend you do that with every one of your mixes. Listen to them in mono. And then we also have the multimeter, just so I can kind of get a visual inspection on everything going on here, from the overall frequency analysis to the LUFS, to everything. So that is a useful tool as well. All right, everyone, we're gonna wrap this one up right there. That is how I put together this entire mix using nothing but stock Logic Pro plugins. So what did you think of the mix? How did you think everything sounded as far as just using everything 100% stock? Hit me down in the comments and let me know. And again, as a reminder, look for the link to download this template in the description of this video, so you can have that for free and then play around with it to your liking. And if you like this video, if you find this useful, do me a huge favor and hit that like button and share it with a friend, and consider subscribing to my channel. That button is right down below as well. And don't forget to hit the bell so you're notified when I upload new videos. And as always, thank you for watching, and thank you for your support.